Hi everyone, welcome to CSR Soapbox. Today we're going to be speaking about what to expect from 2022 within the fire and security industry. And we've got some experienced professionals that are going to be giving us their opinion on what they think is going to be coming within 2022. I'm Maddy, Klecha, and I'm from CSR. I'm the head of candidates within the company. Leigh, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm Leigh Fletham. I'm one of the associate directors at CSR. Been with the business for 8 years. Thoroughly enjoy what I do. Really excited about this webinar and looking towards 2022 and what that's going to bring for us. We've got some very well esteemed guests with us, and what I'm going to do is just hand you over to Martin, who's going to introduce himself, and then the guests can move on from there and give you a brief introduction to themselves, what their experiences are and their specialities. So Martin, if you'd like to take it away.
Thanks very much, Leigh. My name is Martin Watson. I'm the Industry Liaison Director for Mighty Fire and Security. It's kind of my day job. I also sit on the board of the BSIA and chair the Security Systems section, and I'm the chairman of the Fire Industry Association.
David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's David Scott. I'm the Managing Director at Skills for Security, who are the largest fire and security apprenticeship provider in the UK, and also a director of the British Security Industry Association. I've now worked in the industry for over 15 years, been managing director at Skills for the last 2 years, and I only had a solid 6 months of working at Skills before we ended up in lockdown and pandemics and COVID. So it's been a fun experience, and business is doing really well.
Excellent. And Richard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Leigh. Good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Marshall. I'm Director of Sales for the EMEA region for an American physical security company. I'm specialising access and video. I've been in the security industry incredibly since 1981, so I have seen a lot of change over those 40 years.
And finally, Paul, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Paul Pope. I'm the Group Business Development Director for CareerTech Lighting, Global Fire Equipment and GFE Tech, our R&D side of the business. I'm also I'm also on the Board of Directors with Martin, who is the Chairman for the FIA, and I'm also Vice Chair of the FD&A Committee in Council in the FIA, and Vice Chair for Services Council in the FIA as well. Been in the industry since 1987, so I've seen quite a bit. I was in the security industry to start with, and then I moved across to fire probably in the 1997, 96.
No worries. Thank you for everyone for introducing themselves. I'm going to start off with a question for you, Martin, in terms of the legislation side. So what are the biggest changes over the last few months in terms of legislations and compliance? I know that's a very broad question. So.
It is, Andy, a very broad question. I mean, I think it's worth probably kicking off that in security, we've got less legislation in security as an industry generally, but it's primarily driven by standards and codes of practices. But it is also worth mentioning that the standards change far more frequently in the security world than they do in the fire world. And it's really difficult sometimes to keep up to date. So you need to ensure you keep an eye on what the latest standards are. A couple of things worth mentioning in the last 12 months, ECHO, which is the electronic call handling operations. Many people in the security industry will be aware of ECHO. This is where the alarms that are received by alarm receiving centres off the back of URNs, which are police response numbers, are passed through to police command and control centres. Now, currently, the National Police Chiefs Council says that you should use all intruder and hold-up alarms should be progressed through ECHO. Reality is only Essex and Metropolitan Police are currently ready, but it is something that you will see more of coming forward. The other one on security is the digitalisation of the UK telecoms infrastructure. So this is where all of the old PSTN network, the old analogue network, is being upgraded to IP. And by 2025, effectively, there'll be no analogue lines left. Now, what that means for the security industry is that, in essence, some of the alarms that are transmitted from intruder alarms will need something to happen to them. Some will work, some will need some changes to work, etc. So you know, my plea is if you're still out there installing analog type signaling devices like digis, you know, please stop, take a look at alternatives, because it's not that far away when you won't be using them. On the fire side, we have to mention Brexit. Now, post-Brexit, the manufacturers, and Paul is far more experienced than this and can give you verbatim on this, have to use a UKCA mark now. This is to replace the old CE marking. Now, it was due to be in the kind of imminently, but we've managed to get another 12 months. So effectively, all of those manufacturers have got their products re-certified against this new UKCA mark by the 1st of January 2022. Just worth mentioning, as always, everything Brexit Northern Ireland is slightly different. So in Northern Ireland, they're probably going to have the CE mark and a UKNI mark, just to make it a little bit more complicated. And two other very quick ones from a legislation. The fire safety bill that received royal assent early to mid this year. And in essence, that makes amendments to the regulatory reform fire safety order, which anyone in the fire industry will be aware of. In simple terms, it's about improving fire safety standards within buildings and to make it clearer as to who the duty holder is. And this includes, you know, someone within residential properties where effectively you have to have external walls assessed, etc. And the final one is the building safety bill. The building safety bill is off the back of the Grenfell tragedy in 2017 and following Dame Judith Hackett's report. It was really around reviewing the whole construction industry, and it was a pretty damning report, I think it's fair to say. But what came out of that was real fundamental changes. We've seen the start of that in what's called Gateway 1 since August of this year, but there will be accountable persons allocated, there will be ramifications to it, and there will be significant changes in the whole legislation around how we construct buildings and install fire alarm systems within them.
No worries. Thank you, Martin. Leigh, do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot to take in there, so it's going to be an interesting year, that's for sure. A lot of changes there. David, wanted to ask you something actually. Obviously, with 2021, it's been a difficult year all the way around, with skill shortages being a real big issue within the industry. Obviously, with your expertise, what's really happening in 2022 that's going to help alleviate that? Is there been a big uptake in places with skills for security, people booking people in?
Yeah, so I think the good news is that the people are starting to use the apprenticeship on a much larger scale. When I started 2 years ago, we had 100 apprentices. We're now over 350 live on programme, and we're seeing employers appreciate what you get from an apprentice nowadays. I don't think I've got good news for anyone though. I think from the research I've done, it's only going to get worse over the next few months. The skill shortage is horrendous out there. And the government are reporting the engineering sector as a whole, so including the fire and security sector, will experience a skill shortage of around 265,000 over the next 4 or 5 years. So this industry and all engineering sectors will suffer further from ongoing skill shortages out there. Now, this has been going on since 2008, since the last recession. We've done research with the BSIA and Skills for Security that proves the sector has grown year on year since 2008. However, apprentice numbers for the majority of that have stagnated, have relatively stayed the same throughout the nation. So, but there is companies out there that are doing amazing work, and actually what we're starting to see over the last 6 to 8 months is that companies are starting to appreciate that if they can sort of train and retain their current staff, then that's the way forward. And what you're seeing now is a number of large organizations that are setting up their own academies. So it's the name of the company, Then Academy, and we're working with 4 or 5 different companies that over the last 6 to 8 months that have actually set up their own academy, but it's run and managed by Skills for Security. And it's almost given those companies this prestige of being seen as a sort of supporter of training and development throughout the sector. And what I think that gives to these people is they get to build and they get to essentially develop their own staff. They get to build their own talent from the ground roots up. And the academy doesn't just stop at apprenticeship level. It can be used right through the business as a way of training their staff, developing their staff, and as I mentioned at the start, retaining. So for me, I think we're going to see a lot more of that in 2022. Already we're working and building on these relationships with larger employers, where you'll see that developing on an ongoing basis, really.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's really interesting. I mean, the government have got some amazing grants out there behind it as well for apprentices, and I'm amazed that more and more companies aren't taking advantage of that.
Well, I think just to answer back on that, really, you're 100% right. The government are throwing billions of pounds at training and apprenticeships just now, and the one thing I would say is that our largest period of growth has been between October and forecasted for January. The numbers just now are difficult to manage, especially when we are trying to hire the same people to deliver the lessons that you guys can't find. So we are suffering trying to find these engineers to deliver education to young apprentices.
I was about to say that. Do you get many people that want to actually teach that sort of side to it?
It's an amazing industry to come into, the education side. I mean, I've had a fantastic career and I've worked in it now for 11 or 12 years. And we're finding, why not? You get Christmas off, you're not working weekends, you're not on call. I hope there's loads of engineers that contact me after this webinar and say, I want a job in education. And naturally, we do have to pay a little bit more for that expertise as well, because we're not looking for just a normal engineer. We're looking for somebody that's the best at all times to come in and educate.
Yeah, and you can help. It's rewarding, isn't it, as well? You can see the younger people coming up.
Sorry, Maddy, if I could just pick it up on David's point, it's worth mentioning because I'm one of those organisations that's working with David around looking at apprenticeships, and the frustration, and David knows my frustration around the whole apprenticeship levy piece. We do have money. The government have taxed us based on salary bills. We have money that we can invest, and we spend a lot of money on training our people already in the business, not just new apprentices. But the big frustration is that we can only use it for training, and we can't always kind of fit everything into a suitable training program that allows us to use that levy.
So
there is still some work that needs to be done around what we can spend the levy on.
Definitely. They need to look at the money expenditure, because it's no point, we're just wasting money on trying to fit.
And we did some research in similar industries, and Martin knows this because I spoke to him in great detail about it, but we looked at the electrical sector as a comparison, and there's 300,000 electricians work in the UK just now, and they've got 15,000 apprentices. So you're talking 5% apprentice to engineer ratio. However, if you look at the electronic security or electronic firearm security sector, I've got around 100,000 employees, but only a ratio of around 1%, 1.5% for apprentice to engineer. So we know that there's a lot of growth still to be had in recruiting apprentices. And we are promoting that everywhere just now, that if you are a business that has 30 staff, then you should still have a ratio of 5% apprentice to engineer ratio. And that, for me, is a good benchmark to start at, if we can get our industry up to the same level as the likes of electrical.
Yeah, no, that's a good percentage, to be fair. It's always just like, we've got one apprentice and 30 people. And it's never gonna, you're never gonna progress people that quickly, are you? Oh, so yeah, so obviously we'll go on to Richard. In the security perspective side of it, what sort of changes are you seeing within 2022 for the security side?
Well, I'll touch on it from the access control perspective and the video perspective. They're the two big drivers in security, not so much the alarm side that I touch. On the access control side, I would say it's because of COVID, there's a move towards contactless technologies. I'm seeing that an awful lot more now. The advent of biometrics is happening. Contact services is moving a lot. So on that side, I can see that happening an awful lot more. On the video side, currently video set up with normally servers on premise. We're starting to see a movement away from that into cloud technology and cloud recording. It takes me back to the old days when we moved from analytics recording into DVRs and NVRs, so there was reluctance to do it. And we're seeing that now, that people are now starting to look at it, and they're starting to move their servers away into the cloud. It's normally a subscription basis, as like a service basis, but we're starting to see that. We think it's going to reach a tipping point where one or two of the big blue chip companies start to set up their systems, security systems into the cloud. When that happens, I think there's going to be a follow suit situation going on. So on the video side, we say going into the cloud is going to happen more and more away from off premise. But I think the biggest change that I would say is the advent of COVID again, and how companies are setting themselves up with cyber. There's lots of benefits and lots of features with the products. The products are getting cleverer, as we all know. But overarching all of it, whether it be access control or video or intruder, it's the cyber resilience in the products. That's what's changing. These products are connected to networks. They can be hacked. So we're seeing a lot of really good stuff going on to harden these products up into this world. Smart working as well, remote management to implement cybersecurity, and the flexibility to go with that is also a big point. So to recap that, I would say contactless technology in access control, I'd say a gradual shift of, I think that shift is going to start to pick up speed of moving into the cloud for video. But with both together, it's the cyber resilience that's been built into the products more and more, because the threat is there. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse.
Yeah, definitely. So do you think that's going to be a big one for next year, like within the next couple of years then? The cyber
it's happening now. It's happening now, and it's going to intensify, because when we talk about cyber, it is very much a moving target. We've got systems that have been pen tested, and the threat landscape that they were tested against has changed completely. It's moving all the time, and the attack ways in which products are hacked into are changing. So cyber is a biggie in security. I know it's not it's based on standards, but I'm seeing a lot of work going into resilience here, and that will just intensify as we go on, because you can't be exposed to this level of threat. So that's going to pick up as we go on.
I just to agree with Richard, I wholeheartedly think that the government over the next year will tighten down on cyber security with the potential of fast tracking standards right through. I honestly think you can already see that when you go for procurement processes with the government, you have to have schemes like Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, just to do business with the government. And you can see already there's a number of like ongoing sort of legal proceedings that capture what's happening in cybersecurity just now, and I really do think that that's going to be an important change that will affect our industry over the next year. That and AI, which is again something that's heavily been reviewed but not yet regulated. We are going to be heavily involved in bringing new standards to the forefront and making sure that all manufacturers and installers are working ethically around these new types of technology.
You beat me to it, because I was going to cover AI a bit later on.
Well, I've not seen too much, Richard.
You can still say it.
No, I'll come on to it later on. But with whether you be a contractor, an integrator, or a manufacturer, you had to produce standards, your sustainability standard assessments, but now customers want to see your cyber strategy, how you're coping with it, because it's a serious issue, and how your products are going to withstand that. So I'm seeing that as a big driver. That's the biggest change that I'm seeing. Despite all the things I'm talking about in terms of cloud, it's a cyber resilience that is the number one for me.
And we will see that, Richard, won't we? And picking up on David's point, it's one of the things from a legislative, it's easy for me to say, perspective going forward. DCMS are doing a consultation at the moment. There is work on AI and facial recognition that will likely change it. And we will see stricter rules around what we can use, how we can use it, when the data's passed on, etc., etc. So we will start to see that in the security world, absolutely.
That is needed though, isn't it? If it's going that way, you need that.
Well, yeah, there's a debate, isn't there, between how restrictive do you want to become? Don't forget, automatic facial recognition as a technology, and which is part of the AI family, it is a very useful technology for both businesses and for both the law enforcement agencies, etc. So it depends on how restrictive you want to get. Is that balance between using the technology and using the data, using biometrics, and people's freedom, as it were? And there's a fine balance.
Yeah,
I agree, and I think the AI sector will double overnight.
It's going to explode, absolutely explode, and the microset chips are going to get better and stronger. And this is what I was going to talk about later on, but it's moving to the edge. AI edge is something that, if I was asked about what's coming up next year, it's definitely AI edge algorithms that go into it. I'll cover it more a bit later on, but you've touched on it now. That's a biggie, but it's all interlinked with cyber resilience. That's the main point.
lovely. Thank you, Richard.
Lots of exciting stuff there. Paul, bring you into this. What are you seeing as a big trends in the fire industry perspective now? And what do you expect to change in the future?
Well, I think in order to look forwards, we've still got issues with things that are currently in place. And Martin touched upon the UKCA, which is, as we know, fire's heavily regulated, and we can't move without certification on products, and even products that we've had certified must comply with those requirements of the certification ongoing. And we've started to see issues with the UKCA that's pinned down on us now from the construction products regulation side of things. And that's been given us a stay of execution for 12 months for manufacturers to comply with the requirements of the construction products regulation. And it is quite a huge impact on the industry, and that's going to go forward to next year, and it's going to have to be a heavy focus on manufacturers and it's not just the UKCA for the construction products industry, it's for the pressure equipment directive as well for extinguishers. The FIA has taken the broad brush of representing the entire fire industry, right the way through to engaging with BSIA, which are affected by UKCA as well. That their members are, and also people like Timber Frame Association and people like that. All of those products have to get over the line for this deadline. So you can imagine for the last 12 months, everybody's just been trying to get their head around what they do to get to comply. And there is compliance required under the CE marking for the EMC directives and the low voltage directives for compliance straight away right now. So there are lots and lots of products that fall under those categories that have to comply. So that's going back over last year, and it's going to carry on for the next year to get over the line. It's going to be a major focus for the industry. But one other thing has been component shortages and supply issues within the industry. It's one of those things that the FIA has now brought in a survey to look at people that are suffering from component shortages and how they're affecting their businesses. And bearing in mind, if components are short and that product needs that component to be built, but that component is part of the certification for the product, then the manufacturer may not be able to produce that product. And things like hospitals, schools and things like that, which rely on replacement products and components, may suffer from not being able to get those products due to these issues that we're experiencing on a global perspective. So that's just a couple of industry things that are happening that will go on into next year. But in terms of technology, where are we going? What are we seeing in fire? Well, believe it or not, eventually this remote connectivity, so connected securely with encryption for the fire world is something that's relatively new, albeit I was on a committee many years ago writing the rules and regulations of what we can and can't do for remote connectivity for fire. It really hasn't been highlighted so much as this last 12 months with regards to people not accessing sites and getting onto sites and wanting to use technology now to see what's going on in systems. So we are seeing that will be a future, remote connectivity of fire systems using secure encrypted technology. And that will be a definite technology explosion over the next few years. Coupled with things like digital logbooks and recording and data, keeping data of sites off of a site is very important. Compliance, and we look back at what the Dame Judith Hackett report did on Grenfell, and it mentioned over 150 times competency. And that goes back to skills and everything. So engineers being competent, systems being competent, and your documentation being competent. And so digital logbooks and making things work in a way that competency is not missed because it's taking you through a procedure are ways in which we can meet these objectives laid down by legislation and what's coming towards us. So we all have a personal interest in being compliant, and this technology will help us to be compliant. But the problem is with remote connectivity, we need the rules established to what we can and can't do, because there will be bending of the rules if we're not careful on what you're allowed to do. And I have to say the FIA has got some good guidance on that, which is a guidance policy on the remote access of control of fire detection and alarm equipment. And that you can download that from their website. So that gives you a good understanding of what can and can't be done with connectivity. And it gives you the background on the connectivity standard, and it gives you an agreement of protocol, which you need to do with your client. You need to agree a protocol of connectivity, what isn't allowed, and get that agreed up front. And then there are, within this FIA guide, there are activities of what is allowed in terms of read-only, and then there are activities which are not permitted. And it gives examples of clear guidance of what you can't do on these systems. And the FIA has been working quite clearly over the past years with Euralarm, which is a European body for fire based in mainland Europe, and we work with them have even more intrinsically together now after Brexit, because we're still heavily reliant upon European standards for the fire detection alarm. So Euralarm and FIA work closely on this. And Euralarm, there is a new European standard which is EN 50710, which is services standard for fire and security systems. So I'm not sure if my security colleagues here will have known about this document, but there is this standard out there for compliance with connectivity. And this also encompasses the pan-European approach of services in line with the objectives of the European Services Directive, to make sure that all countries adopt similar practices and approved practices for connectivity and servicing. So all these rules and regulations will help this technology be adopted and be adopted securely going forwards. And I think that's the most important thing, is that when we do connect and when we do things remotely, we don't actually make the systems worse than they are today. We make them much more secure and safely. So the objective of all this is to be coherent and to make sure that we're not isolating circuits on a fire system because we can. that would be a bad effect if these types of things happen and get found out and we lose loss of life because of this bad practice. So you have to be very clear on rules and regulations when you bring in this technology, especially on fire and on security. You don't want to be disconnecting things and making the system down. So yeah, but the technology is there. The rules and the regulations need to be followed. You need to know what you're doing, and as providing all of this happens, things will be much better for the environment going forwards, and obviously help us through this COVID situation where we do still need to carry on and do work, but we need to do it safely, but with the right tools.
Yeah, me and Leigh were speaking about this, the fact that the regulations within fire have not been strong enough, and now there's the Grenfell set that, and I feel like now they're like Martin and Paul, obviously you're part of that, so you know that there's been a big push on that. So is there going to be a push on companies having to have engineers that are putting on the FIA courses, or how's?
Well, it's a really interesting one. It's quite interesting listening to Paul talk about the remote technology. I mean, I come from the IT industry many decades ago, and it's quite interesting in the common IT world. Remote interrogation, doing work remotely was an acceptable. It was just the norm, but there was lots of technology around that. We're starting to see more of that in the security world, as Richard's already alluded to, where we can remotely diagnose things, we can remotely reset some systems and certain things. As Paul's kind of said, we've always steered away from that in the fire world because of the nervousness about what you could do, because nobody wants you resetting a fire panel remotely thinking, oh yeah, well, we don't think there's a fire on site, we'll just reset the panel, or we'll isolate that loop. In an odd way, if you isolate, say, a detector on an intruder system or something like that and it gets broken into, you're only talking about property. If you isolate detectors on a fire system and it doesn't detect a fire, you have potential loss of life. And that's always been the reluctance of actually having the remote technologies or managing and controlling the remote technologies. But it will come, and it has to come from a commercial perspective. Service organizations will need remote access to systems. We can't afford to keep sending engineers to every sort to reset an alarm, do these things. From both a commercial perspective and, as Paul alludes to, environmental perspective. We don't want engineers traveling in their vans, to sites, etc. So it's a really interesting one. It will come, but I'm just not convinced we're quite there yet.
Yeah.
It shows that with the difference between fire and security, because fire has the life safety implication sitting over it, where in security, the access to remote sites through encrypted networks is there. It's been going for a long time. It's a form of IT. We can do pretty much everything remotely, and because of COVID, that's what we do. It hasn't really stopped anything. But there's far, as Martin said at the very beginning, there is far less legislation in security compared to fire. Listening to Paul, then it reminds me just how tight the regulations are in the fire world compared to security. A lot happens in security that's unregulated.
I think what's open for going forward is to have the guidance so that the policy is there to prevent accidental downgrading of what we do on a system. Now, I mean, and this is why it is important that you do agree a policy with your remote connectivity with your client, because that protocol and that policy is important. It forms a contract of what you can and can't do, and this is where tailored solutions come into play. But we really do need the guidance in place. So there is great work gone on by the FIA to produce this guidance. It stems back from many years ago when I first worked on it. With a very good fire guy called Dave Bartlett, bless him, who was an advocate for, if anyone knows Dave Bartlett, he was one of the biggest advocates for skills and apprentices in fire. And if that man had stayed, with us for much longer, David would have changed our industry dramatically, because there was nobody more passionate about him. And fire was in his blood, and he was a good guy. So. But he was a big pusher of this type of system, and we created rules and regulations there. But in order for the fire safety side to move forward, engineers really do need this clear, structured guidance, and we do need rules because, you know, when things go wrong, they're used in court, and we want to protect the engineers. We want to protect companies going forward. So very, very important one for the FIA going forwards, this keeping an eye on this technology and keeping an eye on the standards, but educating companies using the technology to comply with not providing something that downgrades systems and allows things that can be done by people that perhaps think it's allowable because it's on there to do. They just do it.
Yeah, I think there's, when you're at work, it's like with everyone here probably, you kind of go on like an autopilot and you just think, oh, I'm at work, and you don't really think about what you're actually do, like what your actual job entails. And sometimes I think people forget they're sitting there, they're servicing an alarm to save people's lives, but because they do it every day, it just gets probably a bit, do you know what I mean? It just gets lost in it. I think that loss of importance is,
yeah.
isn't
And
it?
I think one of the questions you asked was, what do we do with training and competency? I think we've always, and Martin knows this, and the FIA has always tried to push, and it will never be legislated as, I say never, it's very difficult for the government to legislate to have qualified engineers all the time and qualified companies. It is something that the FIA wanted to do because of the nature of the job. We have a gas safe. It was very clear that the FIA wanted something like fire safe, that the engineers could be qualified to be competent. But what we do try to say now is competency comes with a level of protection when things go wrong. We have most of the standards, British standards, are mainly codes of guidance to use. But when things go wrong, they become actually used in a court of law as to do the Bible. So these proving competency and companies using companies that are competent helps them to provide a level of a security from there. We've done everything we possibly can. And I think with fire, and again with remote connectivity, it's a wonderful technology, and to have that going forwards for us in a way that we can use it appropriately and cut down on contacts in sites when we're suffering with COVID issues and when we have environmental issues, and we want to be able to get answers to clients quickly and look at what's going on, and also perhaps perform remote health checks on a fire alarm system. So this is looking at the entire fire alarm system remotely and saying what's going on in there, and are there issues there, and we can get those issues out quickly and target visits that are required where they're needed rather than where they're not needed.
I mean, just picking up on Paul's point there, so and he's absolutely spot on. And David knows my view on this as well. I would personally love to see a fire safe type scheme, be it a card. We've got it as gas safe. What was the old Corgi scheme? It's now gas safe scheme. I personally don't see why we cannot. We've got to stop sitting on our laurels and saying trading on what's known as grandfather rights, and engineers who used to do it away, Maddy, picking up on your point for so long, that they don't necessarily know. They don't look at the things. I mean, we all spend our life walking around buildings going, oh my God, that detector's in the wrong place, that so-and-so's in the wrong place. And what we need is our engineers to be competent and skilled. Now, Paul mentioned organisations. So from an organisation perspective, most of the organisations are accredited by either the NSI or the SSIB against BAFE schemes or against NACOS and that in the security world. So we've got organisations that are audited, but I genuinely think we need to audit down to the individual engineer level and have a card that says that engineer is competent to work on this system, and they're not going to do anything, or they're unlikely to do anything that's going to put people's lives at risk.
Definitely.
100%. Can't agree with you more, Martin. I think it's something that the industry is crying out for. I think people want it. There's a definite desire for it. I know the engineers want the training. We hear it on a daily basis. Number of fire engineers that tell us, I want FIA training, and my company's not putting me through it. It astounds me. And the one thing that Paul mentioned there is competency. And that surely, if you've got your engineers trained to FIA standards, surely that's a big proof of competency within the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the FIA training, you know, it changed scope. And both Paul and I were on the board at the time when we took away the old BS 5839 modules, which were very popular with engineers. They liked the training. They'd go on a module, but it was attendance only. It was an open book type test at the end. What you've now got to do is sort of proper NVQ. It is a qualification. You know, so the new FIA training is much more robust. And interestingly enough, early doors when we put the original training out, not many people passed it because as an industry, perhaps we wasn't as good as we thought we were. And it was a bit of a wake-up call. And what we've done is actually rewritten it, rechanged it, made the questions. Now, there was an issue with some of the questions and the way they were written, but in essence, you know, we're in a much better place now. So I would love to see everybody. I mean, certainly my aspiration is to put all of my engineers through the formal FIA qualifications to try to get them all competent, you know, with actual NVQ. I can't remember if it's a 2 or 3, but it's certainly worth doing.
And I think there's a big upside for the dear old customer in all this, because a lot of contractors are trying to meet tight SLAs with tight deadlines, and they dispatch engineers to site in a timely manner. But the customer gets on site an engineer that isn't up to level, up to the right scratch. So the argument is, well, we responded, but the customer will say you responded, but with the wrong type of person. If that person turned up on time and with the right credentials to say, I'm fully trained to tackle this system, that's got to be a customer win as well.
Sure. Yeah.
I personally think it needs to be written into the standards. If you look at the way the electricians do it, you've got the IEE wiring regulations, which stipulates that you're not allowed to work on electrical systems unless competent. We don't have that in BS 5839 or BSEN 50131. The change needs to be driven from the sector, from industry, to stipulate that competency is now a mandatory element throughout the sector. And I think we'd be surprised how many competent people there are out there. The industry has done a lot of good things for a lot of years, but it's been fragmented approach. It's never been a joint effort. And I do think the BSIA and the FIA over the last couple of years have been stronger than ever. And I actually think that through Martin's leadership and Simon Banks and Mike Reddington's leadership, we're going to see a different industry in the years to come. The passion's there to change the industry for the better, and competency is absolutely key for everybody. I don't think anybody can argue with that.
I think there is a lot of self-regulation by companies out there that even though there is no requirement for competency, I do believe the industry is quite self-regulating, and the majority of companies out there do the engineer training, and the majority of the companies out there understand their level of degree of exposure to things when they go wrong, and they use competency in training and their company qualifications to their advantage in terms of protecting themselves as a business when things do go wrong. So I do think there's quite a high level there, and it has moved quite a lot. But you know, there's always room for improvement in all these type of things, and the courses are there now. So there's no real excuses now for engineers not to be competent. The courses are there. They're not expensive. They're an investment in your engineers, and also from the engineers' point of view, I'm sure they'd love to go on them and do them. And most of them are, you know, itching to get qualified, and that's the main thing, is that they see now a path of education to actually make their career more qualified. You know, so there was paths for electricians to get qualified. There's now paths for fire and obviously security guys to get qualified as well, which, you know, has been, let's say, probably a long time coming, but it, you know, there's been the FIA doing these qualifications now. It is a qualification for them, so it should be seen by these guys as a positive step to start the process of getting onto these foundation courses. And then, you know, and we see the engineers, once they get on them, they want to get through and get up really highly qualified, up to sort of A-level standards, which is, you know, really good for our industry. So we're there. We've got the courses, we've got the British standards, and we've got all these standards that make us competent industry. And I think, if it's all there on paper and it's all there in training, and we just put the skills together with that, the industry is in great shape. And but the majority are there.
Only in the fire sector, though. There seems to be a huge gap in the security sector, in my opinion, where there is no FIE qualifications, there is no anything similar. There is obviously the likes
there's a challenge then for the FIA and BSIA to get together and to help each other out.
I do think that, and to be honest, it's been on my radar for some time, because it'd be silly not to be on the radar. But TAVCOM do a good job of being one of the bodies, and I'm certainly a big fan of TAVCOM. But I do think that it's an area for the BSI and skills and to look at in future development.
Do you know one of the challenges though, and it goes back to that technology movement, and Richard Richard alluded to this. The real challenge from a fire perspective, our fire systems, the technology is moving, but the standards at which we service against, have been fairly static for a while. We test every device in a 12-month period. We do the periodic inspection. So the way we test it. The challenge on the security side is that technology is moving at such a pace.
Yes.
So do I train them on CCTV closed coax networks? Not anymore, no. Do I train them to Cisco certified network professionals? It's moving at such a pace that actually most of our security engineers are getting to the point where they're actually IT network engineers, as opposed to...
I was literally about to say that.
As opposed to traditional kind of engineers with cameras and access control. You almost have this demarcation where you have incredibly complex integrated systems in the security world, and the training is moving at a pace, and I think it's just difficult to keep up with it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't aspire to it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't look to do something that actually gives security engineers some form. I mean, let's be honest, David, your fire and security apprenticeship is a great start to that. It gives them such a great, the 3-year apprenticeship gives them such a great, grounding in the fire and security industry, but we just need to get more people through the apprenticeship schemes and start that journey, because we are paying the price for the mid-80s onwards of not having apprentices. We're paying the price now in this country, and we're going to continue for a little while until we all stick a hand in our pocket and start training young people or kind of, people in our industry.
Martin, it's all about, you just said it there, it's all about IT competence. When we look for staff, the security principles are secondary. It's to understand their depth of knowledge with IT and networking and scripts and software and code. That's where we're going now. And integrations is all IT. The security bit comes afterwards, but if they haven't got that basic understanding, we can't do much with them. And that industry, from my day, it was about relays and multi-cores and coax and the old days, and the guys that did installations then wouldn't have a clue what's happening now, because it's all about IT, and it's going to go that way more. And then on top of that, you layer into it what we touched on earlier on with cyber resilience. That is the future. That is it. So we have to get the right people in that understands the landscape moving forward.
My difficulty is we still need to train them on those old skills before, so that they can repair the old systems that are out there, whilst also being totally IT competent.
I don't think we need to train any of them on relay stroking. There's only probably Richard and myself, perhaps Paul, know about making break tensions on the old relay switches.
You'd be surprised.
No, I recently placed someone, and he didn't have loads of experience, but he had an IT degree. And I placed him straight away in like an integrated company, service engineer, and he's smashing it. And I know he could do it, because you can know when you just speak to someone. He didn't know any of like the systems. He hadn't worked on any of the integrated side. He hadn't done any of that. But when you just speak to someone, and you know straight away that they're going to be fine on that integration side. So I definitely think that
he's very savvy to get trained in IT. You say a degree in IT.
He got a degree,
the principles of security engineering would come afterwards. If he gets the core principles of IT, the rest will follow.
Yeah, and that goes back to you, obviously, Dave, with obviously, I know you said that them like teaching them the basics, but most of them, if they can do the IT side, they don't often struggle with that. the like normal like intruder and stuff like that. They do obviously, it's just learning that bit, but because he came from like a intruder sort of like very hands-on company, but he has an IT degree, so he kind of had a bit of both. But I definitely think the IT side is a way to go, like security side, because there's just not the experience out there, is there, Leigh? Like commissioning and stuff like that. There's just not the
The difficulty is the IT guys tend to want to command a bigger salary because they have gone through that background. The wages in the IT sector are certainly significantly higher than the fire and security sector. So it's a temptation of do those guys want to come into this industry? Have we got something that we can offer them that is going to advance them in some way, and obviously still be attractive on the salary?
And that's our challenge, really. You know, where we sit as an industry today, we need such a breadth of skills. I mean, I was fortunate. I was old school engineering. You know, we had to understand about the basic electrical practices, how to fault find on cables, how to do all these things. And of course, IT came into the world and we had to understand IT. So we were quite lucky. What we tend to find now is that you've got people who are very good on IT and not so good on the basic electrical principles, or very good on the basic electrical principles, but not great understanding of the IT. And what we've got to do is bridge that gap. So we get this kind of, this breed of engineer who understands the old school engineering techniques, the old school kind of electrical principles, and how to fault find on a cable, but also gets the networking bit. And unfortunately, you're probably never going to have a person who can do it to the highest level, but you need someone who can do all of those to a good level, and then you'll have your specialists.
I think you're looking for Superman, Martin.
Well,
I can do it. Why can't everyone else?
Exactly.
Just to finish it off, I'm just going to ask everyone kind of what the best piece of advice you'd give to the audience that are listening at the moment. It doesn't have to be a long one, just one line's fine. Start with you, Richard. What's the best advice you'd give to the audience?
It's exactly what we've just been talking about. It's upskilling, it's training. You just covered it. The security industry has moved on into the deep world of IT experience and know-how. And as Martin just said, you've got to find the right person with that know-how. So I would recommend any company to bring on staff with that knowledge or train people up, because that is the future, and with the knowledge of cyber.
Lovely, thank you. What about you, Paul?
I'd say, stay connected and understand the rules and regulations for remote connectivity and the legal requirements, and digitize your documents for what's coming.
Lovely. Martin?
Similar to Paul's, I would say, ignorance of the standards and legislation is not a defense, unfortunately. So just please make sure that you get in touch with the right organisations, join a trade association if you're not already a member, because they will give you shed loads of information, useful information, but don't sit on your laurels, thinking it won't impact them, because it will.
Lovely. Dave?
If you're an employer provider, then take on more apprentices. If you're a manufacturer, we want to hear from you, because we want to create partnerships to get more equipment in and allow the students to learn new types of technologies, new products. We are very much a forward-thinking company where we want to teach apprentices the full cycle of the industry, not just product specific.
I've just got a couple of quick Q&A questions. One for you, Dave. I've got one from Jordan Duggan. Sorry if I said your name wrong, Jordan. I'd like to ask David about the training for apprentices in the fire sector, as I have been informed that they are looking to remove the fire pathways in apprenticeship, which is a huge concern.
Yeah, so I know Jordan. So this question actually came as a surprise to me, which I can't quite believe. I didn't know that. However, one thing I would say is that the uptake of fire apprentices so the apprenticeship split into 3: fire, security and fire and security. And the uptake of the fire sector is lower than the rest. Now, I don't believe that is because the fire industry isn't engaging in apprenticeships. I think that the fire industry is so entwined with electrical that the majority of the fire engineers actually go through an electrical apprenticeship just now. And the reason they do that is because they don't know that the fire and security apprenticeship is an option. And the reason I think that is because when I worked in previous employment, I worked very closely with the electrical department. So I was very aware that the amount of electricians they had, apprentices and program, there was a vast majority of them were out there installing fire alarm systems, but they were qualified as an electrician. So it's about changing the mindset of employers and changing the mindset of young people that actually the fire sector or the fire and security sector is a much more attractive, innovative sector than just being a basic electrician. Now, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, you can be a qualified electrician and you can have an amazing career, but if you come into the fire sector, you're going to be working with tech, you're going to be working with innovation. We're already on this call talking about cloud and AI and all of these things that are going to affect the fire sector, and I think that's the future.
Lovely, thank you. Lovely answer. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, so that's basically the end of our webinar, and thank you for everyone that's watched. Obviously, thank you to the panelists. Me and Leigh really appreciate your opinions, and I've certainly learned a lot, if no one has.
Yeah.
So yeah, me and Leigh have certainly learned a lot in terms of looking for people, and I think we're definitely going to see a lot of changes in people's CVs in terms of and just experience. Hopefully we'll see more training and just a different type of CV than normal. Is that right, Leigh?
Definitely, I think there's so much. The industry is moving so quickly. The technology is moving quickly. It's really, really encouraging to see that the fire sector is really moving as quickly as the security side now in terms of remote dialing and remote access to systems. I think that's a massive leap forward, and it's definitely going to help a lot of businesses as long as they abide by the rules. And if the training is there for apprentices and companies invest in them, that's a massive leap forward. That will help the industry because the youngsters are used to a lot of the technology that they use on a daily basis as they grow up. They will grasp a lot of the IT side of things, whereas no disrespect to the older engineers, that sometimes they struggle with it a little bit. But if they can pass down their knowledge to the youngsters on the way that they were trained on some of the older systems, then you'll have that perfect mix. So no, it's great. I've learned so much this evening. I'm excited by the technology and the passion that all of you guys have got for the industry. So it looks like we're going to have a great 2022.
Thanks for coming, guys. Thank you, everyone. Just to let everyone know, if they obviously, if you do want a recording of the webinar, we are going to be sending it out. So just contact me and Leigh. And yeah, just we will be doing another webinar. So just look out for that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.